Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. So today we're gonna speak about the news, obviously at first, and then I'm gonna put some light on the Ukrainian special military operation which is ongoing in the Kursk Oblast. I guess we already may conclude something about it because it was started more than 4 months ago. But at first let's go to the news. There was the big kaboom today in Ust-Luga port of the Russian Federation. The port is located not far away from the St. Petersburg, and here is Ust-Luga town. If we zoom in, here you can see the port itself. It was confirmed that the strike happened somewhere in this area and the sensitive equipment was hit. The equipment that is used to produce the gas condensate. What is interesting that the same particular facility was hit roughly 1 year ago on January 21st, 2024. By that time, 2 of the drones hit the same critical spot of this gas facility. But yesterday there was just a single drone, and for now it's hard to say whether the facility operation was definitely significantly disturbed or not. 1 year ago it was, and for a single month Russia wasn't able to use this entire infrastructure. Ust-Luga is one of the biggest commercial Russian ports out there, but Ukrainian drones are still capable to reach it. I don't know if you remember, but there was the Ukrainian drone strike on the Russian command headquarters facility in Lvov, Kursk Oblast. The headquarters were located in a bunker under the building, but it seems like Ukraine used the Storm Shadow cruise missile. Those missiles have the capabilities to penetrate the bunkers. And as it is reported by the Russian channels, Russians lost there the Colonel Oleg Timoshin, who was the commander of one of the Russian strategic aviation regiments. What was he doing in Kursk Oblast, quite far away from the strategic Russian military airfields? Well, maybe it was the important meeting for the time and they were looking of how to use aviation gliding bombs in Kursk region and so on. So Russian command required many of the experts to stay at the same place, and luckily Storm Shadow also decided to participate. However guys, this information for now comes not from the official Russian media, but from the Russian Z patriotic channels. But nevertheless, usually we have the confirmation in 2 or 3 days. And after the Ukrainian strike on Lvov, Ukraine also hit Ivanovsky village, not far away, also in the same Kursk Oblast. There wasn't the Russian command headquarters, but the Russian barracks and the Russian logistic center. And as it is officially reported, this guy was severely wounded. This is the Russian war criminal Konstantin Nagaika, a commander of 112th Russian Missile Brigade, and he is responsible for many of the civilian casualties which happened in Groza village of the Kharkiv Oblast, Ukraine. So now the Russian doctors are fighting for his miserable life, and there is the great chance for them to lose that fight. Something happened the last night in Taganrog, Russia. As the Russian media reported, Ukraine launched the big-scale attack on the Russian infrastructure facilities in Rostov Oblast. The Russian military already said that they've shot down 60 of the Ukrainian drones. Drones were also spotted on the way to Moscow, but still I am waiting for information of what exactly was hit there. This is the front line and the Russian bunker, a small one for the Russian soldiers, conscripts. Yes, there were young Russian soldiers who were sent not to Ukrainian front lines, but they defend Kursk region. And they say that Baba Yaga, it's the drone which drops the mines, drop one of the mines towards their accommodation. They say that they're lucky because they have lots of the anti-tank mines in the storage and those were not hit. A Ukrainian Baba Yaga drone may fly for the very long distance behind the front lines. In this particular case, the Ahmad battalion car was hit. So even TikTok warriors sometimes suffer because of the Ukrainian drone strikes.
Вот так вот, блядь, и набираем водичку, нахуй. Пацаны, лица не полю с такой вот лужей, блядь. Так вот выживаем, нахуй.
A usual drinkable water for the Russian soldiers, 3rd year of war, and still they are in lack of the robust supplies for essential needs for their soldiers. In Ukrainian army, it would be just extraordinary case if soldiers would have to take the water from the pits. That might happen if the soldiers are encircled, if there are no supplies at all. But even in that case, our drone operators tried to bring some water with the drone drops. I saw many of the videos like that, but here it's the usual thing actually for the Russian soldiers to take water from definitely a second army in a world that doesn't care about their own soldiers. An interesting case then, 2 of the Ukrainian soldiers imprisoned 14 of the Russian ones. And right after Russians were captured, they gave some short interview. How it happened? Well, I guess they lost the will to fight. That explains everything. Poor supplies, abandoned by their command, sent to the useless midwave attacks. That's the result, you see. A Russian propaganda media military correspondent Alexander Martemyanov was captured by Ukrainian FPV drone. And that's their last taken image. The car they were traveling broke down, something happened with the wheel, and while they were doing this necessary maintenance, drone hit this vehicle. By the way, my friends, if you like the job that I do on YouTube, you may also support me on Patreon. I'll put the link for my Patreon page right in the video description below. And now, guys, let's speak about the Kursk operation. It has been started on the 6th of August 2024, so 5 months ago. As I said to you from the very beginning, only time might show whether this operation was successful or not. And I think that I can already tell that from the strategic point of view, it was not the success of the Ukrainian army, and let me tell you in details why. From the very beginning, Ukraine started a massive full-scale attack, so it wasn't the standard advancement of the Russian Volunteer Corps or the Russian Foreign Legion, which happened before, for example, in Belgrade and also in the Kursk regions. It was the massive scale of the operation, similar to those which were conducted in Ukrainian Kharkiv Oblast. And the most success Ukraine actually got during the first months of the offensive. The Russian conscripts who were protecting the border together with Akhmat battalion ran away, were imprisoned or captured. The Surovikin defense line that was built behind the border was taken by Ukraine with almost no resistance. The biggest town of Sudzha in this area was captured by Ukraine in a matter of a week. And Ukraine was going to attack Korneva, the main hub and supply center for the Russian army. Russia was frustrated and announced the massive evacuation of civilians. Well, the Russian officials didn't help civilians in most of the cases, so it was up to civilians to organize themselves to leave their homes. And there were many of the cases of how the Russian regular army, together with Akhmat battalion, looted the homes of their own citizens. Ukraine also crossed the Russian border not far away from Totkina, but failed to advance to the settlement because of the obstacle, the river. But in September, the attempts for Ukraine to take Korneva under control mainly failed, even though Ukrainian army partially went to the settlement. And after Ukrainian forces start to retreat from many of the settlements and regions, Ukrainian army went to, before there was one more attempt, by the way, to go to Korneva, but it wasn't a successful one. Later on, Ukraine started a new offensive. It happened towards Vesela village, and by the way, before Ukraine cut all of the bridges across the Seine River. So the idea for the Ukrainian command was to trap the Russian army without supplies in Glushkovsky region. But for this mission to be successful, Ukraine had to take Korneva. Unfortunately, it wasn't achieved. Russians also put the pontoon bridges because the Seine River is not very wide. Some of the bridges were kaboomed by HIMARS, but Russia put them again and again, providing supplies for their army group. And since Russians started to attack on Lyubimovka deep into Ukrainian defense, Ukraine came out with the idea to start the new offensive and to trap the Russian forces between Ukrainian border and Lyubimovka. However, Russia on time sent enough forces towards Vesela, so this attack mainly failed for Ukrainian side. And yes, there were territorial gains, but after Russia took Vesela back under control and continued the assault towards Svelitkova, Lyubimovka, and at the beginning of December, the Ukrainian-controlled territory shrank to what we have more or less right now. Nowadays, Russia attacked from many of the sides and they use North Korean troops. Now Ukraine mines all of the fields around, and that makes the advancement of the Russian and North Korean forces very slow and with heavy losses. Sometimes Ukraine also might counterattack, but the initiative in general in the Kursk Oblast even goes for the Russian side. In August last year, Ukraine was leading this operation, and now it is forced to defense. And that raises a huge question: why Ukraine still fights for the Kursk region? Why not to withdraw the forces from Kursk and to use those to protect the eastern front lines? Well, I would say that after all, Ukraine will be forced to withdraw the forces from Kursk region in any ways, because yes, Ukraine lost the initiative, but at the same time, I guess it's too late to just command forces and call them to withdraw, because for the few months Russia accumulated a big number of their forces in their Kursk region, and in case Ukraine would just withdraw from Kursk, Russians may follow Ukrainian army to Sumy region. So from this perspective, obviously it's better to fight for now in Kursk than on Ukrainian territory, because it's better to lose the control over those Russian villages than over the villages on Ukrainian controlled territory. But before the beginning of the Kursk operation, there were not enough Russian forces even to protect their own border. So yeah, actually with this advancement, Ukraine basically forced Russia to create the major amount of their forces right at the border with Sumy Oblast of Ukraine. And now there is the threat towards the Sumy Oblast. And you know, guys, we still do not have the announced goals of this Kursk operation. Zelensky even told that the Kursk operation was the counter-reaction to the Russian preparation of the attack on Sumy Oblast, but no. There were not enough Russian forces to attack on Sumy. They just ran away from the Ukrainian attack, which was started in August. So it was not to defend Sumy region. Now there is more threat to Sumy actually, as I've told you. And Syrskyi said that Ukraine should create the buffer area between Ukraine and Russia, but this buffer area is kind of small. And it creates actually lots of the problems for Ukrainian army. Ukraine uses the best of the best forces there. Yeah, sometimes Ukrainian military also send average brigades with mobilized soldiers, but you know, many of the experienced brigades are now fighting in Kursk, and they also have losses. I think that 2 or 3 weeks ago Ukraine lost 2 of the Leopard 2 tanks and 3 of the Bradleys, and it was just one moment of this operation. Well, maybe Ukraine wants to keep also Kursk Oblast for the possible future negotiations with Russia, but Russian officials already say that they will not negotiate over their own territory. They'll just push Ukrainian forces out, and unfortunately they have all of the tools to do it. Because as I've just showed you, Ukraine is losing the ground. Yes, little but it is losing the ground. So I don't really think that it was the reason that Ukraine foreseen that Trump would be elected and start negotiations, so there will be the talks about the Kursk Oblast. No. Well, potentially the goal for Ukraine was to advance to Kurchatov nuclear power plant and to exchange it, for example, for Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. That I would understand. But the power plant is located 60 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. It's very far away actually. And if you want to start this operation, you need to advance with huge number of the forces. You need to take roads, railroads under control to provide reliable supplies, and this bridgehead is not enough. It should be like that at least. Because the longer supply shoulder you need, the thicker the area should be to protect your supplies, for them to be reliable, robust, and on time. And in this case, it wasn't done properly. So from the very beginning of the operation in August, it was a huge tactical success of Ukraine. Ukraine got many of the villages and Sudzha town under control. It was a great success, and I was also kind of happy about this event. But even at that time, I think that Ukraine would withdraw the forces this winter, because I didn't see the strategic reason for Ukraine to stay in the Kursk region for a long time. Well, maybe the goal for Ukraine was to deflect the attention of the Russian army in the east and force Russians to withdraw some part of their forces and send to fight in Kursk. Partially it happened, but not enough. Russia continued their assaults on the east quite fast, so if it was the plan, it didn't work. From the positive things, I would say that the Kursk operation uncovered some of the conflicts between the Russian army and, for example, Akhmat battalion. You probably remember Abtialudinov, the commander of the Akhmat battalion, who was driving his car along the Kursk Oblast behind the front lines and saying many times that Akhmat is holding the ground and so on. That's just the Russian command which gave the bad orders. But now in January, the conflict is mostly over, or it's not public. The Kursk operation was planned and organized by Syrskyi, a Ukrainian military army commander, the main general of Ukrainian army. As I remember the first week of this operation, I've told that Syrskyi put his career on this operation. If it fails, he would be replaced, and I still think so. Yeah, Syrskyi is kind of the interesting general. I was actually surprised that Zaluzhny was replaced by him, but Syrskyi is willing to conduct any sort of the orders. At least that is what we know from the media journalists. And let's say his reputation wasn't ideal even before he became a Ukrainian military army commander. Moreover, he is Russian. He is Russian. He was born in Vladimirskaya Oblast, Russian Federation. He studied for some time in Kharkiv, but later on went to the Moscow Higher Military Command School. Graduated from the school in 1986, Syrskyi joined Soviet Army Artillery Corps. He served in Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Czechoslovakia until the collapse of the Soviet Union. And later on he started to serve in Chuhuyev, but in 1993, following the Soviet Union collapse, Syrskyi military unit in Chuhuyev was transferred under Ukrainian command. So he was just at that place by the time of the Soviet Union collapse. He was in Ukraine. That's why he just joined the Ukrainian army. If he was in Tajikistan by the time, he would be in Tajik army probably. Like from what I see, he has no other connections with Ukraine. He further started to build his career, later on married a Ukrainian woman and has 2 of the sons with her. But until 2009, he was married to a Russian woman who had a son from the previous marriage. And his ex-wife emigrated to Australia in 2010. Syrskyi does not maintain any relations with her family. And later on, during the battle for Donbass, Syrskyi was the commander of this operation, Battle of Debaltseve. It was mainly a disaster for Ukrainian armed forces. Partially, Ukrainian forces were encircled, and they had to penetrate this encirclement ring under artillery fire with heavy casualties. And since that time, many people started to call him a butcher. On 8th of February 2024, Zaluzhny was replaced with Syrskyi, and 9 days later, Syrskyi commanded the withdrawal of the Ukrainian forces from Avdiivka. And since that time, the advancement of the Russian forces increased dramatically in the east, and for the couple of months I see numerous of the situations similar to Debaltseve, well, not as massive as it was back then, but still there were numerous of the encirclements. Also, the goals of the Kursk operation were not even explained to everyone, and his close relatives, so his parents, still do live in Vladimir province of the Russian Federation, because they are Russian and Syrskyi is Russian himself. And you know, guys, I have here the question, how can you command to drop the bombs on a country where your parents live? Basically your original motherland or fatherland. Yeah, he says that he's not communicating with his parents, with his relatives in Russia, but you know, guys, I think that he still has some of the moral obligations towards his own parents. Well, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't like order to bomb, what is there, Vladimir province if I was Syrskyi, at least, and in some way it might influence the effectiveness of the Ukrainian army. So yeah, Syrskyi is basically Russian who commands Ukrainian army. And Syrskyi's mother is actually supporting Putin. He liked some of the posts containing the statements of Vladimir Zhirinovsky. He is like really anti-Ukrainian. And also she liked the poster of Vladimir Putin with captions, "We are for Putin, Putin is hero of Russia. And good health to you, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, God bless you." The attitude of the Russian army towards Syrskyi, that he betrayed his motherland, that he's now working for Nazis. And yes, ethnically Syrskyi has no connections to Ukraine. He's basically Russian. Well, maybe now he has some of the family connections because he married a Ukrainian woman. But originally, you know, it was the Soviet army, Soviet Union, where Ukraine and Russia was in the same country. And you know, I also have the similar family story. Then our family used to live in other country for a very long time because Soviet Union collapsed and we just stayed there because there was the job. Same stuff happened to Syrskyi. Well, guys, I'm explaining you the story because maybe you didn't know, and my personal opinion that Syrskyi is not competent to lead the Ukrainian army. But who am I? You know, a guy with a mic, so military and Ukrainian political command, maybe they know more. But as a guy with a mic who constantly reviews the front lines, I see many of the mistakes. I see them. So what will happen in Kursk? Well, it will be like that if nothing extraordinary, really extraordinary happens. Plus, I know why the 47th and other very capable brigades joined this operation, because Syrskyi doesn't want it to over, because in that case he would lose his position. And we see the pressing now on Syrskyi even from Ukrainian media and from Zelensky. Actually, some of the members of parliament of the presidential party criticized Syrskyi a lot. So maybe Zelensky is already getting ready to replace Syrskyi and blame him for many of the mistakes. And now guys, let's review the front lines. We have the latest update from the deep state military map. I see the big movement in Kurakhove direction, so it was yesterday, it is today. Russians advanced with their usual Klavs tactics and they went to Shevchenka, I think occupying it fully, almost fully. Kurakhove is gone for Ukraine. The next battle will go in Dachne. There is also the light movement in Velika Novosilka. No, there was no update here, but from the other source I see how Russia pushed more to this supply road. Basically, they already cut it, so there are no robust supply connections towards Velika Novosilka, and Ukraine will be forced to leave this town. And you know, guys, also Russia started to go from this direction towards Baranivka village, so yesterday and today. That's why I think that they will be concentrated also on the northern part of the Donetsk region. Maybe after all they wouldn't go to Dnipro, or maybe they will go, it's hard to say, but they concentrate lots of the forces in the small attack vectors from this area. As a variant, they will go from this side, and they'll push from Toretsk and Chasiv Yar. We'll see really the outcome this year. So guys, it's all what I want to say today. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.